Welcome to Poirot Stories, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings captivating mysteries to life.
In the shadowed halls of Greenshaw Folly, a grand manor hides a deadly secret. A man lies dead, a dagger in his heart, a glass of brandy laced with poison at his side. Who among the elegant guests, Mrs. Cresswell with her missing earring, the scorned Vivian Harrow, or the mysterious butler Willis wields the hand of a killer? Why does a note signed V point to betrayal? Hercule Poirot with his little gray cells and Miss Jane Marple with her village wisdom unravel a web of lies where every clue matters. Can you spot the truth before the final twist? Chapter 1. The Shadow of the Canvas. In the golden haze of an English summer, the village of St. Aldwyn's nestled quietly under the rolling hills of Devon, its thatched cottages and winding lanes exuding an air of timeless serenity. Yet beneath this idyllic surface, a subtle tension simmered, as if the very air held its breath. At the heart of the village stood Ashfield Manor, a grand Elizabethan estate, its ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows gazing imperiously over manicured gardens. It was here, on the 15th of August, 1925, that the first threads of a dark mystery began to unravel. The manor belonged to Sir Reginald Ashby, a retired art dealer whose fortune had been amassed through an uncanny knack for discovering masterpieces in obscurity. His latest venture, a private exhibition of 5 rare paintings, each a treasure of the Renaissance, had drawn a select group of guests to Ashfield Manor. The event was to be a triumph of culture, a celebration of art, and, as Sir Reginald boasted, a testament to the enduring power of beauty. But beauty, as Hercule Poirot would later observe, often masks the ugliest of truths. The guests arrived promptly at 6 o'clock, their motor cars crunching along the gravel drive. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion to the great detective, had been invited not for his artistic acumen but for his long-standing friendship with Sir Reginald's nephew, Edward Ashby. Hastings, with his soldierly bearing and earnest demeanor, stepped into the manor's great hall, his eyes widening at the opulence before him. Crystal chandeliers gleamed above a polished oak floor, and the walls were adorned with portraits of stern-faced Ashby ancestors, their gazes seeming to follow every movement. "Quite a place, isn't it?" Edward Ashby greeted Hastings with a warm handshake. A lean man in his 30s, Edward had the easy charm of one accustomed to wealth but not yet hardened by it. His dark eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as he gestured toward the paintings displayed on easels at the far end of the hall. Uncle's latest obsession. 5 little masterpieces, each worth a king's ransom. He's calling them his 5 little pigs. Hastings chuckled. Pigs. Hardly flattering for such treasures. Edward grinned. "It's from a nursery rhyme, you know. This little piggy went to market." Uncle thinks it's clever. Each painting has a story, a journey. But between you and me, I think he's more in love with the drama than the art itself. The other guests mingled, their voices a low hum beneath the clink of champagne flutes. Lady Beatrice Ashby, Sir Reginald's young wife, glided through the room in a gown of emerald silk, her beauty as striking as it was cold. Her smile, Hastings noted, never quite reached her pale blue eyes. She was flanked by Dr. Malcolm Vance, a renowned art historian with a sharp tongue and sharper intellect, whose spectacles gleamed as he lectured a bored-looking young woman on the virtues of chiaroscuro. The young woman, Miss Clara Beaumont, was an aspiring artist herself, her auburn hair pinned loosely, her expression one of barely concealed impatience. Nearby, Mr. Leonard Crane, a wealthy collector and Sir Reginald's rival, stood with his arms crossed, his broad face set in a scowl as he eyed the paintings. His wife, Mrs. Evelyn Crane, a nervous woman with a penchant for fidgeting with her pearl necklace, hovered at his side, her eyes darting about as if expecting some unseen threat. Finally, there was Mr. Julian Holt, Sir Reginald's solicitor, a wiry man with a perpetually furrowed brow who seemed more interested in the contents of his briefcase than the festivities. As the evening progressed, Sir Reginald took center stage, his booming voice commanding attention. A stout man with a florid complexion and a neatly trimmed mustache, he exuded the confidence of one who believed himself untouchable. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, raising a glass, "tonight we stand in the presence of genius. These 5 paintings, each a masterpiece of the Italian Renaissance, represent not only art but history, passion, and sacrifice. They are my legacy, and I trust you will appreciate their significance." The guests applauded politely, though Hastings caught a flicker of unease in Lady Beatrice's expression and a tightening of Mr. Crane's jaw. The paintings themselves were breathtaking. A Madonna with a serene gaze, a warrior in gleaming armor, a merchant counting gold, a lover gazing at a distant horizon, and a child holding a lamb. Each canvas seemed to pulse with life, their colors vivid even in the soft glow of the chandeliers. Dinner followed in the dining room, a sumptuous affair of roasted pheasant and fine wine. Conversation flowed, though not without undercurrents. Dr. Vance argued passionately about the authenticity of one painting, while Mr. Crane muttered about Sir Reginald's questionable acquisitions. Lady Beatrice, seated at the head of the table, responded to questions with practiced charm, but offered little of herself. Miss Beaumont, meanwhile, sketched absent-mindedly on a napkin, her eyes flicking toward Edward with a curious intensity. As the clock struck 10, the party retired to the drawing-room for coffee and brandy. Hastings, feeling the weight of the rich meal, stepped onto the terrace for a breath of fresh air. The night was cool, the stars bright above the darkened gardens. He lit a cigarette, savoring the quiet, when a sudden cry shattered the stillness. It came from the great hall, sharp and anguished, followed by a thud that sent a chill down his spine. Hastings rushed back inside, his heart pounding. The guests were already converging on the hall, their faces pale with shock. There, sprawled on the oak floor beneath the 5 paintings, lay Sir Reginald Ashby, a dagger protruding from his chest. Blood pooled beneath him, stark against the polished wood, and his eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. Lady Beatrice stood frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth while Mr. Crane bellowed for someone to fetch the police. Dr. Vance knelt beside the body, muttering about pulse and rigor, though it was clear Sir Reginald was beyond help. "My God," Edward whispered, his face ashen. "Who could have done this?" Hastings scanned the room, his mind racing. The paintings loomed above, their subjects seeming to watch the chaos with silent judgment. Every guest had been in the drawing room or nearby, yet no one admitted to seeing Sir Reginald leave or hearing anything until the cry. The manor's heavy doors were locked, the windows secure. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. The local constable, a flustered man named Inspector Burrows, arrived within the hour, his notepad trembling in his hands as he surveyed the scene. "A clear case of murder," he declared, though his voice lacked conviction. "We'll need statements from everyone. No one leaves the manor until we've sorted this out." Hastings, however, knew that this was no case for a village constable. This was a puzzle requiring a mind far sharper, a man who saw what others overlooked. As the guests dispersed to their rooms under the watchful eye of Burrows' men, Hastings slipped away to the manor's telephone. He dialed a number he knew by heart, his voice steady despite the night's horror. "Poirot, old chap," he said when the familiar voice answered. "I'm at Ashfield Manor. There's been a murder, Sir Reginald Ashby. It's a devil of a mess, and I need you here. Can you come at once?" There was a pause, then the precise accented voice of Hercule Poirot replied, "Mon ami, you know that I, Hercule Poirot, do not refuse a challenge to the little grey cells. I shall arrive by the morning train. Do not let them touch anything, Hastings. The truth, it is in the details." As Hastings hung up, he felt a flicker of hope. The manor was a cauldron of secrets, its guests bound by motives yet to be uncovered. But with Poirot's arrival, the shadows would be pierced, and the truth, however cunningly hidden, would be revealed. Chapter 2. The Crime Revealed. The air in Ashfield Manor hung heavy with shock and suspicion as the reality of Sir Reginald Ashby's murder settled over the household. The great hall, once a stage for opulent celebration, now bore the grim marks of violence. A dark stain on the oak floor where Sir Reginald had fallen, the dagger still protruding from his chest, its ornate handle glinting cruelly in the lamplight. The 5 paintings, Sir Reginald's cherished 5 little pigs, stood sentinel on their easels, their silent figures seeming to mock the chaos below. Captain Arthur Hastings, his heart still racing from the horror of the discovery, stood among the guests, each face a mask of grief, fear, or calculation. Inspector Burrows, the local constable, bustled about with an air of authority that did little to conceal his unease. A stout man with a ruddy complexion, he was more accustomed to petty thefts and village disputes than a murder in a grand manor. His notebook was already filled with scrawled observations, though Hastings doubted their usefulness. "Right then," Burrows barked, addressing the assembled group. "No one leaves this house until we've got to the bottom of this. I'll need your statements one by one, starting now." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Lady Beatrice Ashby, pale and composed, sat rigidly on a velvet settee, her emerald gown now seeming out of place amid the somber mood. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, though Hastings noticed a faint tremor in her fingers. Edward Ashby, Sir Reginald's nephew, stood by the fireplace, his youthful charm replaced by a haunted expression. He kept glancing at the hall, as if expecting his uncle to rise and declare the whole affair a grim jest. Dr. Malcolm Vance, the art historian, adjusted his spectacles and muttered something about the tragedy of genius cut short. His sharp features were drawn, but his eyes darted about, taking in every detail of the room. Miss Clara Beaumont, the young artist, clutched her sketchbook to her chest, her auburn hair falling loose from its pins. She seemed on the verge of tears, yet there was a defiance in her posture that intrigued Hastings. Mr. Leonard Crane, the rival collector, paced near the paintings, his heavy footsteps echoing. His wife, Mrs. Evelyn Crane, hovered nearby, her nervous fingers twisting her pearl necklace until Hastings feared it might snap. Mr. Julian Holt, the solicitor, stood apart, his briefcase clutched like a shield, his thin lips pressed into a line. Inspector Burrows began his questioning with Lady Beatrice, who recounted her movements with icy precision. "I was in the drawing room with the others," she said, her voice steady. "After dinner, we all retired there for coffee. I stepped out to the terrace for a moment, alone to clear my head. It was perhaps 5 minutes before 10 when I returned. I heard nothing unusual until the cry." Burrows scribbled furiously. "And you, Mr. Ashby?" He turned to Edward. Edward ran a hand through his dark hair. "I was in the drawing room talking with Miss Beaumont about her sketches. I didn't leave until we heard the scream. I swear I saw nothing." One by one the guests gave their accounts, each claiming to have been in the drawing room or nearby at the time of the murder. Dr. Vance said he had been discussing a painting with Mr. Crane, who confirmed the conversation with a curt nod. Mrs. Crane claimed she had been fetching a shawl from her room but returned before the cry. Miss Beaumont admitted to stepping into the corridor to retrieve a dropped pencil but insisted she was gone only a moment. Mr. Holt, ever the picture of restraint, said he had been reviewing documents in the library, alone, until the commotion drew him out. Hastings listened intently, his mind cataloging the alibis. Each account was plausible, yet the timing was tight. The cry had come at 10 o'clock precisely, according to the Manor's grandfather clock, which chimed moments before the guests rushed to the hall. Sir Reginald had been alive at dinner's end, laughing heartily at 9:30. That left a narrow window, perhaps 15 minutes, for the killer to act. The Manor's heavy doors were locked, the windows secure, and the servants, questioned separately, reported no strangers on the grounds. The dagger, Burrows noted, was a decorative piece from Sir Reginald's collection, kept in a glass case near the paintings. Its presence in the crime suggested premeditation, yet no one admitted to touching it. As Burrows fumbled through his questions, Hastings' thoughts turned to the paintings. The 5 little pigs loomed large, their subjects, Madonna, warrior, merchant, lover, and child, seeming to hold secrets of their own. He recalled Sir Reginald's pride in them, his cryptic reference to their journeys. Could the paintings be connected to the motive? Hastings shook his head, chiding himself for letting his imagination run wild. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the answer lay in the details, as Poirot so often said. The police surgeon arrived shortly after midnight, confirming what was obvious. Sir Reginald had died instantly from a single stab wound to the heart. The dagger, driven deep, had been wielded with force, suggesting either strength or fury. "No struggle," the surgeon muttered, peering at the body. He didn't see it coming. This detail struck Hastings as significant. Sir Reginald was a robust man, not easily overpowered. The killer must have been someone he trusted, or someone who moved with such stealth that he had no chance to react. But how had they entered and left the hall unnoticed? The room was accessible only through the drawing room or a side corridor leading to the library, both crowded with guests at the time. As the night wore on, Burrows grew increasingly frustrated. "Someone's lying," he growled, flipping through his notes. "But I'll be damned if I can pin it down. Too many people, too many alibis. Hastings, standing by the window, felt a pang of sympathy for the inspector. The case was a tangle of contradictions, a puzzle that required not just diligence but genius. He glanced at his watch. 1 in the morning. Poirot would be on the first train from London, arriving by 9. Until then, Hastings resolved to keep his eyes open, noting every gesture, every glance. He recalled Poirot's maxim. "The truth is in the little things, Hastings." The turn of a phrase, the flicker of an eye, these are the keys. The guests were confined to their rooms with constables stationed at the manor's exits. Hastings, unable to sleep, wandered the drawing room, his gaze falling on a small table where Miss Beaumont's napkin lay, its surface covered in delicate sketches. One caught his eye, a rough outline of the Madonna painting with a faint shadow behind the figure that hadn't been visible on the canvas. He frowned, tucking the napkin into his pocket. It was probably nothing, but Poirot would want to see it. As he returned to his room, the manor seemed to close in around him, its shadows deeper, its silence oppressive. The killer was among them, hidden behind a facade of grief or innocence. Hastings felt a chill, not from the night air, but from the certainty that the truth was far more complex than it appeared. He could only hope that Poirot, with his unmatched intellect, would arrive before the killer struck again. Chapter 3. The arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning sun cast a pale, almost reluctant light over Ashfield Manor, its rays filtering through the heavy drapes of the drawing room where the guests had gathered, their faces etched with fatigue and unease. The events of the previous night had left an indelible mark. Sir Reginald Ashby's murder, the blood-stained dagger, and the oppressive silence of a house that seemed to guard its secrets as fiercely as its locked doors. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, his eyes scanning the gravel drive, his heart buoyed by the knowledge that help was imminent. The local constable, Inspector Burrows, fumbled through his notes, his authority waning with each passing hour, but Hastings knew that the man to untangle this knot of deception was about to arrive. At precisely 9:30, the crunch of tires announced a motor car's approach. Hastings hurried to the entrance, where a small, immaculate figure emerged, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the dust of the journey. Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, adjusted his perfectly knotted tie and surveyed the manor with sharp green eyes that seemed to pierce the very stones. His waxed mustache twitched slightly as he greeted Hastings with a nod, his voice carrying the precise, accented cadence that never failed to command attention. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his tone warm but tinged with curiosity. "You have summoned me to a most intriguing affair. A murder, you say, in this grande maison. Tell me everything, but slowly, for the little gray cells, they require order and clarity." Hastings, relieved to see his friend, led Poirot into the manor, recounting the events of the Immerse previous night. The exhibition of the 5 Little Pigs paintings, the dinner, the cry at 10 o'clock, and the discovery of Sir Reginald's body in the great hall. A dagger in his heart. He described the guests, Lady Beatrice, Edward, Dr. Vance, Miss Beaumont, Mr. and Mrs. Crane, and Mr. Holt, each with their alibis, each with their secrets. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him as if already arranging the facts into a pattern only he could see. They reached the drawing room where Inspector Burrows awaited, his expression a mix of relief and wariness at Poirot's arrival. "Mr. Poirot, is it?" Burrows said, extending a hand. "Heard of you, of course. Bit out of my depth here, I'll admit. A devil of a case, locked manor, no strangers, and a house full of suspects." Poirot inclined his head graciously. "Inspector, I am at your service. But first I must see the scene of the crime. The truth, it hides in the details, and the details, they do not lie." Burrows led them to the great hall, now guarded by a constable. The body had been removed, but the bloodstain remained, a grim reminder on the polished oak. The 5 paintings stood untouched on their easels, their subjects, Madonna, warrior, merchant, lover, and child, gazing down with an eerie calm. Poirot's eyes swept the room, lingering on the dagger's empty case, the heavy curtains, and the door leading to the side corridor. He knelt by the bloodstain, his gloved fingers tracing the air above it as if reconstructing the fatal moment. "Tell me, Inspector," Poirot said, rising. "This dagger, it was taken from the case, oui? Was it locked?" Burrows nodded. "Locked, but the key was in Sir Reginald's study. Anyone could have got to it, I suppose." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Anyone, perhaps, but not everyone. The key, it is a detail of importance. And the time of death, 10 o'clock, you are certain?" "The surgeon says so," Burrows replied. "The cry came at 10, and the body was still warm when we found it." Poirot turned to Hastings. "And you, mon ami, you were on the terrace when this cry was heard. What did you see? What did you hear?" Hastings recounted his movements. The cool night air, the cigarette, the sudden cry that drew him back to the hall. "It was sharp, almost like a scream of surprise," he said. "I ran in and found everyone rushing from the drawing room. No one admitted to seeing Sir Reginald leave." Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the paintings. "These 5 little pigs, as Sir Reginald called them, they are the heart of this affair, I think. Each painting, it has a story, a journey, non? We must learn these stories." He approached the easels, his movements deliberate, almost reverent. The Madonna's serene face seemed to draw his attention first. He studied it closely, then moved to the warrior, his fingers hovering over the canvas as if sensing something beneath its surface. "Magnifique," he murmured, "but also perhaps dangereux." Burrows, growing impatient, cleared his throat. "I've got statements from everyone, Mr. Poirot. They all claim to have been in the drawing room or nearby. No one saw anything, or so they say." Poirot smiled faintly. "They always say, Inspector, until the little gray cells prove otherwise. I will speak with these guests myself, but first I must observe them. The truth, it is not only in what is said, but in how it is said. The glance, the gesture, the hesitation." The guests were summoned to the drawing room, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. Lady Beatrice, still pale, met Poirot's gaze with a cool nod, her composure unshaken. Edward fidgeted, his eyes darting to the door as if longing to escape. Dr. Vance adjusted his spectacles, his intellectual arrogance undimmed, while Miss Beaumont clutched her sketchbook, her knuckles white. Mr. Crane's scowl deepened, and Mrs. Crane's nervous fingers worked at her pearls. Mr. Holt, ever reserved, stood by the window, his briefcase at his feet. Poirot introduced himself with a small bow, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Mesdames et messieurs, I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here to uncover the truth of Sir Reginald Ashby's murder." You are all, I regret to say, suspects for the moment. But fear not, for the truth it cannot hide from me. I ask only that you speak plainly and conceal nothing, for to conceal is to invite suspicion. A murmur rippled through the group, but no one spoke. Poirot's eyes scanned their faces, lingering on each as if reading an unwritten page. I shall begin, he said, by examining this manor, its rooms, its corridors, its secrets. Captain Hastings, you will assist me. Inspector, I trust you will keep these good people here until I return. Burroughs nodded, though his expression suggested he was not entirely pleased to be sidelined. Poirot, with Hastings at his side, began his inspection, starting with Sir Reginald's study. The room was a treasure trove of art and documents, its shelves lined with books on Renaissance painters and ledgers of acquisitions. The key to the dagger's case lay on the desk, innocuous yet damning. Poirot picked it up, turning it over in his gloved hand. So small a thing, he mused, yet it unlocks more than a case, I think. They moved to the side corridor, a narrow passage connecting the great hall to the library. Poirot paused at a small table where a single candle had burned low, its wax pooled unevenly. Interesting, he said, touching the wax. This candle, it was lit last night, but not for long. Why, I wonder. Hastings, recalling the napkin in his pocket, hesitated before producing it. I found this in the drawing room, he said, unfolding Miss Beaumont's sketch of the Madonna with its curious shadow. It struck me as odd. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Very good, Hastings. This shadow, it is not in the painting itself, non. It is a clue, perhaps, to what Miss Beaumont saw, or what she wished to see. We shall keep this in mind. As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot's demeanor was calm but resolute. The stage is set, he said softly to Hastings. The players, they are in place, and the drama, it unfolds. But the truth, mon ami, it is like the shadow in this sketch. It is there, but we must look closely to see it. The guests watched as Poirot took his seat, his presence a quiet storm in the room. Hastings felt a familiar thrill. The game had begun, and with Poirot leading, no secret would remain hidden for long. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The drawing room of Ashfield Manor was suffused with a tense stillness, broken only by the soft ticking of the mantel clock and the occasional clink of a teacup against its saucer. The morning light filtering through the heavy velvet curtains cast long shadows across the faces of the gathered guests, each of whom seemed to wear their unease like a second skin. Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, his posture impeccable, his green eyes moving from one suspect to another with the precision of a metronome. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated nearby, marveled at his friend's ability to command a room without raising his voice. Poirot's presence was a quiet force, and the guests, though reluctant, could not ignore it. Inspector Burroughs stood by the door, his notebook open but his attention fixed on Poirot, who had requested to conduct the initial interviews himself. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice smooth and deliberate. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashby is a crime most foul, but it is not without reason. The truth, it lies in your words, your gestures, your silences. I shall speak with each of you in turn, and I ask that you be precise, for the little gray cells, they thrive on precision. He began with Lady Beatrice Ashby, who rose with the grace of a queen, though her pale blue eyes betrayed a flicker of apprehension. Poirot gestured to a small table in the corner where they could speak privately, yet remain in view of the others. Hastings watched as Lady Beatrice settled herself, her emerald gown replaced by a somber black dress, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Madame," Poirot said, his tone courteous but firm, "you were the wife of Sir Reginald, yet your composure, it is remarkable. Tell me, if you please, of your movements last night from the moment dinner ended until the cry was heard." Lady Beatrice's voice was steady, almost rehearsed. "After dinner, at perhaps 9:30, we moved to the drawing room for coffee. I felt a headache coming on and stepped onto the terrace for fresh air. I was alone for no more than 5 minutes, returning just before 10. I heard the cry as I re-entered the room and we all rushed to the hall." Poirot nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of his mustache. "And your husband, did he seem troubled during the evening? Did he speak of any fears, any enemies?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. Reginald was always confident. He had rivals, of course, men like Mr. Crane, who envied his success. But he never spoke of fearing anyone. He was too proud for that. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Pride, madame. It can blind a man to danger. And you, did you see anyone near the great hall when you returned from the terrace?" "No," she said quickly, then added, "It was dark, and I was focused on rejoining the others. I noticed nothing unusual." Poirot thanked her and moved to Edward Ashby, whose boyish charm had given way to a nervous energy. Edward's hands fidgeted as he recounted his evening, conversing with Miss Beaumont about her sketches, sipping brandy in the drawing room and hearing the cry at 10. "I was with Clara, Miss Beaumont, the whole time," he insisted. "We were discussing her work. She's terribly talented, you know." Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. "And this talent, it kept you both so engrossed that you noticed nothing else? Not even your uncle leaving the room?" Edward flushed. "Well, I suppose I wasn't watching him. He was in high spirits, showing off the paintings. I didn't think anything was amiss." Next came Dr. Malcolm Vance, whose sharp intellect seemed to bristle at being questioned. "I was debating the authenticity of the warrior painting with Mr. Crane," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "We were in the drawing room near the fireplace from 9:30 until the cry. I saw Sir Reginald earlier boasting about his acquisitions, but I paid him little mind. My interest was in the art, not the man." Poirot tilted his head. "And this warrior painting, its authenticity, it is in question?" Vance's lips tightened. "There are irregularities in its provenance. I mentioned it to Sir Reginald, and he laughed it off. Said he had documents to prove its worth. But I saw no such documents." Miss Clara Beaumont followed, her auburn hair pulled back. Her sketchbook still clutched like a talisman. Her voice was soft but steady as she described her evening, sketching in the drawing room, stepping into the corridor to retrieve a dropped pencil, and returning just before the cry. "I was only gone a moment," she said, her eyes meeting Poirot's briefly before dropping. "I saw no one in the corridor." Poirot leaned forward. "And this sketch, mademoiselle, the one Captain Hastings found, the Madonna with the shadow. Why did you draw it so?" Clara's cheeks colored. "It was just an impression. The painting struck me, and I thought I saw something, a shadow perhaps, in the background. It was nothing, really." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, but he said nothing more, dismissing her with a nod. Mr. Leonard Crane was next, his broad face flushed with indignation. "I was with Vance arguing about that blasted warrior painting," he growled. "Sir Reginald swindled me out of it years ago, and I told him so at dinner, but I didn't kill him. I was in the drawing room, same as everyone else." Mrs. Evelyn Crane, trembling slightly, confirmed she had left briefly to fetch a shawl from her room at 9:45, returning before 10. "I passed the great hall on my way back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The door was closed and I heard nothing." Finally, Mr. Julian Holt, the solicitor, spoke with clipped precision. "I was in the library reviewing Sir Reginald's will. He'd asked me to make changes earlier that day. I heard the cry and joined the others in the hall." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Changes to the will, monsieur? Of what nature?" Holt hesitated. "He wished to alter the distribution of his estate, particularly regarding the paintings. He was, vague about the details." As the interviews concluded, Poirot returned to the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mes amis, you have all been most cooperative, yet I sense that not all is as it seems. The alibis, they are neat. Too neat, perhaps. But the truth, it will emerge, for it cannot resist the scrutiny of Hercule Poirot." Hastings, watching from the sidelines, noted the subtle shifts in the room. Lady Beatrice's rigid posture, Edward's nervous glance at Clara, Vance's pursed lips, and Mrs. Crane's twitching fingers. Poirot, he knew, was already piecing together the puzzle, though the shape of it remained elusive. After dismissing the guests, Poirot led Hastings to the great hall, where he examined the dagger's case once more. "This key," he said, holding it up. "It was in the study, yet the case was unlocked. Someone took it, used it, and returned it, or perhaps left it for us to find. And the candle in the corridor burned briefly. Why?" Hastings frowned. "A signal, perhaps? Or someone needed light to move quickly?" Poirot nodded. "Possibly, mon ami, but consider. The cry at 10, the body found moments later, yet no one saw Sir Reginald leave the drawing room. It is a paradox, non? And this sketch of Mademoiselle Beaumont's, the shadow, it is not in the painting, yet she saw it. Why?" He moved to the Madonna painting, his fingers tracing its frame. "These 5 little pigs, they are more than art. They are the key to this crime, I am certain. We must learn their stories, their journeys, as Sir Reginald said." As they left the hall, Poirot's expression was serene, but his eyes burned with purpose. "The questions, Hastings, they are only the beginning. The answers, they will come when we understand the hearts of those who stand before us. For now, we watch, we listen, and we think." The manor seemed to hold its breath as Poirot's investigation began in earnest, each guest a piece in a puzzle that grew more intricate with every word spoken. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The atmosphere in Ashfield Manor had grown taut as a bowstring, each guest moving with the wary caution of one who knows they are watched. The morning's interviews with Hercule Poirot had left a palpable unease, as if his piercing questions had stirred the surface of a still pond, revealing ripples of hidden truths. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the drawing-room, observed the suspects with a growing sense of disquiet. Their polite facades were beginning to crack, and he could almost feel the undercurrents of guilt and fear swirling among them. Poirot, however, remained serene, his meticulous nature undeterred as he sipped a tisane. his green eyes scanning the room with the precision of a hawk. Inspector Burrows, increasingly out of his depth, had latched onto an obvious suspect. Mr. Leonard Crane, the rival art collector whose animosity towards Sir Reginald Ashby had been evident at dinner. Burrows bustled into the drawing room at noon, his face flushed with the confidence of a man who believes he has cracked the case. "Mr. Crane," he declared, pointing a finger, "your quarrel with Sir Reginald is no secret. You admitted to arguing about that warrior painting, and we've got witnesses saying you were furious. Care to explain yourself?" Crane, his broad face reddening, rose from his chair, his fists clenched. "I won't deny I disliked the man," he growled. "He cheated me out of that painting years ago, bought it out from under me with some shady deal. But murder? That's absurd. I was in the drawing room with Vance when it happened. Ask him." Dr. Malcolm Vance, adjusting his spectacles, nodded curtly. "It's true, Inspector. We were debating the painting's provenance until the cry was heard. Crane didn't leave my sight." Burrows, undeterred, pressed on. "And what about this?" He produced a crumpled letter found in Sir Reginald's study addressed to Crane. "It's a demand for payment, £10,000, or Sir Reginald would expose some unsavory business about your collection. Sounds like a motive to me." The room fell silent, all eyes on Crane. His wife Evelyn gasped, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace until a bead snapped off, rolling across the floor. Crane's scowl deepened, but his voice was steady. "That letter's old news. Reginald was always threatening to drag up the past. I ignored it. If I wanted him dead, I'd have done it years ago, not in his own house with a room full of witnesses." Poirot, who had been listening quietly, set down his cup with a delicate clink. "Monsieur Crane, this letter, it is most interesting, but it is not proof. The inspector, he sees the obvious, but I, Hercule Poirot, look for what is not so clear. Tell me, why did you argue so fiercely about this warrior painting?" Crane hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the great hall. "It's personal. That painting was meant to be mine. I'd tracked it for years, and Reginald swooped in with his money and connections. It's not just the painting, it's what it represents." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And what, monsieur, does it represent?" Crane's jaw tightened, and he said no more. Burrows, sensing a dead end, moved on, but his focus on Crane had shifted the room's dynamics. The other guests exchanged glances, their own secrets momentarily overshadowed by Crane's apparent guilt. Hastings, however, knew Poirot well enough to recognize that his friend was not convinced. The letter, the argument, these were too neat, too convenient. Poirot's little gray cells were seeking a subtler truth. As Burrows left to confer with his constables, Poirot beckoned Hastings to the side corridor, where they could speak privately. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "The inspector, he chases the red herring, but we must not be distracted. Monsieur Crane, he is angry, oui, but anger alone does not make a murderer. We must look to the others, to their silences." Hastings nodded, pulling the crumpled napkin from his pocket. "What about this sketch, Poirot? Clara's drawing of the Madonna with that odd shadow. It's been nagging at me." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined the sketch once more. "Oui, Hastings, this shadow, it is significant. It is not in the painting, yet Mademoiselle Beaumont drew it. Was it imagination, or did she see something, someone near the painting that night?" We must speak with her again, but carefully. The young lady, she is nervous, and the nervous, they reveal much when pressed gently. They returned to the drawing room where Poirot requested a private word with Miss Clara Beaumont. She approached reluctantly, her sketchbook clutched tightly, her auburn hair falling in soft waves around her pale face. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing. "This sketch of the Madonna, it is most intriguing. Tell me, why did you draw this shadow?" Clara's eyes darted to the floor. "It was just a feeling. The painting moved me, and I thought I saw something in the background. A shape, perhaps. I don't know. I was tired, distracted." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft as velvet. "Distracted, mademoiselle? By what, or perhaps by whom?" Her cheeks flushed, and she glanced toward Edward Ashby, who was watching from across the room. "It was nothing," she said quickly. "Just the light, maybe. I'm an artist. I see things that aren't there sometimes." Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a smile, but his eyes told Hastings he was far from satisfied. "She knows more than she says," he murmured, "and Monsieur Edward, he watches her too closely. There is a connection here, Hastings. A thread we must follow." The day wore on, with Burroughs continuing to press Crane, whose temper grew shorter with each question. Meanwhile, Poirot moved quietly among the guests, observing their interactions. He noted Lady Beatrice's icy detachment, her refusal to meet Edward's gaze, Dr. Vance's obsessive focus on the paintings as if they held the key to his own salvation, and Mrs. Crane's nervous glances toward her husband, as if fearing what he might say. Mr. Holt, the solicitor, remained aloof, his briefcase never far from his side, its contents a mystery. As evening approached, Poirot and Hastings retired to Sir Reginald's study, where Poirot examined the ledgers and documents on the desk. One caught his eye, a receipt for the purchase of the warrior painting dated 3 years prior with a note in Sir Reginald's hand. "Crane's loss, my gain." Another document, half hidden beneath a blotter, was a draft of the revised will Holt had mentioned, though its details were incomplete, mentioning only the paintings and a new beneficiary. "This will," Poirot said, tapping the paper, "it is the heart of the matter, I think. Sir Reginald, he planned to change his legacy, and someone did not wish this change to occur. But who? And why?" Hastings frowned. "Crane seems the obvious choice, but you don't think it's him, do you?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The obvious, Hastings. It is like the red herring in the fisherman's net. It distracts from the true catch. Crane's anger is real, but it is too loud, too visible. The true killer, they are quieter, more cunning." As they left the study, Poirot paused by the great hall, his gaze lingering on the 5 paintings. "These 5 little pigs," he said softly. "They are more than art. They are motives, secrets, stories. We must learn what each pig represents, for one of them, I am certain, points to the killer." The manor's shadows deepened as night fell, and Hastings felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Poirot's calm certainty was reassuring, but the web of deception was growing more tangled, and the red herrings were multiplying. Somewhere among the guests, a murderer hid, their masks still intact, but not, Hastings hoped, for much longer. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The afternoon sun cast long, slanting rays through the windows of Ashfield Manor, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the heavy air. The tension among the guests had thickened, their polite exchanges now laced with barely concealed suspicion. Inspector Burrows, still fixated on Mr. Leonard Crane as the prime suspect, had taken to pacing the drawing room, muttering about motives and opportunities. But Hercule Poirot, seated in a corner with a notebook balanced on his knee, was not swayed by the inspector's bluster. His little gray cells, as he often said, were at work, sifting through the details of the case with the precision of a watchmaker. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal observer, watched his friend with a mixture of awe and impatience, knowing that Poirot's calm exterior masked a mind racing toward the truth. Poirot had spent the morning revisiting the great hall, his eyes lingering on the 5 paintings, the 5 little pigs, and the empty dagger case. Now, as the clock struck 3, he summoned Hastings to the side corridor where the burned candle had caught his attention the previous day. The corridor, narrow and dimly lit, connected the great hall to the library, its walls lined with faded tapestries. The small table where the candle stood was unremarkable save for the wax that had pooled unevenly, as if the flame had been tilted or moved. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the candle. "This wax, it tells a story. The candle was lit, but not for long, perhaps 5 minutes, no more. Why was it needed? The manor is well lit with electric lamps, no? Yet someone required this flame, and in this precise place." Hastings frowned, peering at the wax. Could it have been used to light the way to the hall? But why not use the electric lights? Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Exactement, mon ami. The electric lights, they are convenient, but they are also visible. A candle, it is discreet, portable. It suggests someone moving quickly, in secret, perhaps to avoid detection." Poirot's attention shifted to the floor where a faint scuff mark marred the polished wood near the table. He knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the mark. "This," he said, "is not the mark of a shoe. It is too small, too precise. Perhaps a piece of furniture was moved, a chair, a stool, or something else entirely." Hastings, trying to follow Poirot's logic, recalled the sketch in his pocket. Miss Clara Beaumont's drawing of the Madonna with its mysterious shadow. Could this be related to Clara's sketch? He ventured. The shadow she drew. Maybe it was someone standing near the painting holding a candle. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Very good, Hastings. You begin to think like Poirot, though perhaps not yet with the same finesse. The shadow, the candle, they are connected, I am certain, but we must proceed with care. Let us examine the great hall once more." They returned to the hall where the 5 paintings stood untouched, their subjects gazing down with an almost accusatory air. Poirot approached the Madonna painting, his fingers hovering over its frame. He tilted his head, studying the canvas from different angles, then beckoned Hastings to do the same. "Look closely, mon ami. What do you see in the background?" Hastings squinted, his eyes straining to discern any detail. The Madonna's serene face dominated the canvas, her hands folded in prayer, but the background was a simple blend of dark hues. "I don't see anything unusual," he admitted. "No shadow, no figure." Poirot nodded. "And yet Mademoiselle Beaumont saw something, or thought she did. Let us consider the light. Last night the chandeliers were lit, casting a bright glow. A shadow, it would require a specific source. A candle, perhaps, held close to the painting. You moved to the dagger's empty case. its glass door still ajar. "This dagger," he said, "it was taken from here, yet the case was not forced." The key was in Sir Reginald's study, accessible to all, but only one used it. And the timing. Sir Reginald was alive at 9:30, dead by 10. The cry, it came at precisely 10 according to the clock. This suggests a swift act planned with care. Hastings, emboldened by Poirot's encouragement, ventured another theory. What if the killer used the corridor to slip into the hall? Clara said she went to retrieve a pencil. Maybe she saw something but isn't saying. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "You are learning, Hastings, but you leap too quickly. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she is nervous, oui, but her sketch, it is not a lie. It is a clue, a moment captured by an artist's eye. We must discover what she truly saw." Leaving the hall, Poirot led Hastings to the library where Mr. Julian Holt had claimed to be reviewing Sir Reginald's will. The room was a haven of leather-bound books and polished wood, its long table scattered with papers. Poirot sifted through them, his fingers pausing on a ledger detailing the acquisition of the 5 paintings. Each entry listed a date, a seller, and a price, staggering sums that made Hastings' eyes widen. "This warrior painting," Poirot said, tapping an entry. "It was purchased from a private collector in Florence 3 years ago. The seller's name is obscured, but there is a note, contested by L.C. Monsieur Crane, perhaps? And this Madonna, it was acquired only 6 months ago from an anonymous source. Most curious." Hastings recalled Dr. Vance's doubts about the warrior painting's authenticity. Could the paintings be forgeries? Maybe that's why Sir Reginald was killed, to keep the truth hidden. Poirot's eyes sparkled. "A possibility, mon ami, but not the whole truth. The paintings, they are not merely art, they are symbols, motives. Each little pig has a story, and one of these stories led to murder." As they left the library, Poirot paused by a small side table, where a single book lay open. A volume on Renaissance art, its pages marked with a ribbon. He flipped to the marked page, revealing an illustration of a Madonna strikingly similar to the one in the Great Hall. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Check provenance, shadow detail." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "This book, it belonged to Sir Reginald, I presume, and this note, it suggests he too saw something in the Madonna painting. Or perhaps he knew of its secret." Hastings felt a thrill of excitement. So Clara's sketch wasn't just imagination. There's something about that painting, something Sir Reginald discovered. Poirot nodded. "Exactement. The shadow, the candle, the note. They are pieces of the puzzle, but we must not rush, Hastings. The killer, they are clever, hiding behind the obvious. We must look where others do not." As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot's demeanor remained calm, but Hastings sensed the wheels turning in his friend's mind. The guests were gathered, their faces a gallery of unease. Lady Beatrice sat rigidly, her eyes avoiding Edward, who stood close to Clara, his hand brushing hers. Dr. Vance polished his spectacles, his gaze fixed on the floor, while Mr. Crane muttered to his wife, who nodded nervously. Mr. Holt, as always, clutched his briefcase, his expression unreadable. Poirot addressed them briefly. "Mesdames et messieurs, the truth, it begins to emerge like a painting taking form. But I require more, your honesty, your memories. Think carefully of last night, of what you saw, what you heard. The smallest detail, it may be the key." As the guests dispersed, Hastings caught Clara's eye, noting a flicker of fear before she looked away. The clue of the shadow, the burned candle, the scuff mark. They were threads in a tapestry Poirot was weaving, but the pattern was still unclear. The red herrings had been cast aside, but the true motive, Hastings knew, was lurking just out of sight, waiting for Poirot's genius to bring it into the light. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The late afternoon light bathed Ashfield Manor in a golden glow, but within its walls the air was thick with deception. The guests, confined to the drawing room under Inspector Burroughs' watchful eye, exchanged guarded glances, their polite masks slipping as the weight of suspicion grew heavier. Hercule Poirot, ever the calm center of the storm, sat with his notebook, his pen moving with deliberate precision as he jotted down observations. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the fireplace, felt the tension like a tightening noose, each guest a potential knot in the rope. Poirot's earlier discoveries, the burned candle, the scuff mark, the shadow in Clara's sketch, had sharpened his focus, and now, as the clock ticked toward evening, new cracks in the suspect's stories began to emerge. Poirot had spent the afternoon in quiet observation, moving among the guests like a shadow, his green eyes catching every fleeting expression. He had noted Lady Beatrice's avoidance of Edward, the way Dr. Vance's fingers twitched when the paintings were mentioned, and the nervous glances Mrs. Crane cast toward her husband. But it was a chance remark overheard as he passed the library that set the next phase of his investigation in motion. Edward Ashby, speaking in a low voice to Clara Beaumont, had said, "You mustn't tell them about the letter, Clara. It would ruin everything." Poirot, pausing just out of sight, had filed the comment away, his little gray cells humming with possibility. Now, as the guests gathered for tea, he decided to press the matter, knowing that secrets, like weeds, flourish in darkness but wither under scrutiny. "Mademoiselle Beaumont," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "A word, if you please." Clara, startled, clutched her sketchbook, her auburn hair falling across her face as she rose. Poirot led her to a quiet corner, his demeanor gentle but unyielding. "You are an artist, mademoiselle, with an eye for detail, yet you have not been entirely forthcoming. Tell me, what is this letter that Monsieur Edward wishes you to conceal?" Clara's eyes widened, her fingers tightening on the sketchbook. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. "There's no letter." Poirot's smile was patient, almost paternal. "Come, mademoiselle, do not play the innocent. I overheard Monsieur Edward's words, and your reaction, it confirms there is something you hide. The truth, it is better spoken now than forced out later." Clara's shoulders sagged, and after a moment she reached into her sketchbook, withdrawing a folded piece of paper. It's from Sir Reginald," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He gave it to me yesterday morning before the exhibition. He said it was private, that I should keep it safe." Poirot took the letter, his gloved fingers unfolding it with care. The handwriting was Sir Reginald's, bold and florid, and the contents were brief but explosive. "My dear Clara, your talent is undeniable, but your indiscretions risk exposure. Meet me in the Great Hall at 9:45 tonight. We must settle matters regarding the Madonna. Burn this after reading." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read, his mustache twitching with interest. "This letter, mademoiselle," he said. "You did not burn it." "Why?" Clara's cheeks flushed. I meant to, but I forgot. I was so nervous about the exhibition, and then he was dead. I didn't know what to do." "And this meeting at 9:45, did you keep it?" She shook her head vehemently. "No, I was in the drawing room with Edward. I never went to the hall, I swear it." Poirot studied her, his gaze piercing but not unkind. "And Monsieur Edward, he knows of this letter?" Clara nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I showed it to him after dinner before we went to the drawing room. He told me to keep quiet, said it would look bad if anyone knew." Poirot folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket. "You have done well to tell me, mademoiselle. But you must not speak of this to others. Not yet. The truth, it is delicate, and we must handle it with care." As Clara returned to her seat, visibly shaken, Poirot beckoned Hastings to the side. "This letter, Hastings," he said, showing him the note. "It is a thread that leads us deeper. Sir Reginald, he wished to discuss indiscretions in the Madonna painting. What indiscretions, I wonder? And why the Madonna?" Hastings frowned, his mind racing. Could Clara have been involved with Sir Reginald? An affair, perhaps. That would give her a motive, especially if he threatened to expose her. Poirot's eyes gleamed. An affair, perhaps, but not necessarily with Sir Reginald. Consider Monsieur Edward's protectiveness. There is a bond between them, no? And this letter, it suggests Sir Reginald knew something that could harm them both. The revelation of the letter was only the beginning. As the afternoon progressed, another secret surfaced, this time from an unexpected source. Mrs. Evelyn Crane, her nerves frayed to the breaking point, approached Poirot as he examined a photograph of the paintings in the library. Her hands twisted her pearl necklace, now missing several beads, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "Mr. Poirot," she said, glancing nervously toward her husband, who was arguing with Inspector Burrows across the room. "There's something I must tell you. I saw something last night before the cry." Poirot turned, his attention immediate and absolute. "Speak, madam. What did you see?" Mrs. Crane swallowed hard. "When I went to fetch my shawl, I passed the great hall. The door was slightly ajar, and I saw Sir Reginald speaking to someone. I couldn't see who it was. Their back was to me, but they were standing by the Madonna painting. Sir Reginald looked angry, and I heard him say, 'You'll not have it, not while I live.' I hurried away before they saw me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this was at what time, madam?" "Just before 10, she said. "Perhaps 5 minutes before the cry. I didn't tell the inspector because Leonard would be furious if he knew I'd been near the hall. He's already under suspicion." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "You have done right to tell me, madame. This person with Sir Reginald. Can you recall any detail, their height, their clothing?" Mrs. Crane shook her head. "It was too dark and I was too far away, but they were holding something, a candle, I think. The light flickered on the painting." Poirot thanked her and dismissed her gently, his mind already turning over this new information. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. "A candle, Hastings, just as we suspected. And this conversation, moments before the murder, it is critical. Sir Reginald was arguing about the Madonna, refusing to give it up. To whom, I wonder?" Hastings felt a surge of excitement. It could be anyone, Clara, Edward, even Vance. They all have connections to the paintings. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Oui, but we must not leap, mon ami. The lies they multiply, but the truth, it is like the shadow in Mademoiselle Beaumont's sketch. It is there, if we look closely. As the evening drew near, Poirot's focus sharpened. The letter, Mrs. Crane's sighting, the candle, the shadow. All were pieces of a puzzle that was beginning to take shape. But the manor's secrets were far from exhausted, and Hastings sensed that the next revelation would bring them closer to the heart of the mystery, or plunge them deeper into its shadows. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. The evening shadows stretched long across Ashfield Manor, cloaking the drawing room in a somber twilight that mirrored the mood of its occupants. The guests, weary from 2 days of confinement and suspicion, sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting between one another and the door where Inspector Burroughs' constables stood guard. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit unruffled despite the hour, observed the scene with a calm intensity, his green eyes catching every flicker of emotion. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the fireplace, felt the weight of the case pressing down. The mounting revelations, Clara's letter, Mrs. Crane's sighting, the candle, the shadow, building toward a breaking point. Something he sensed was about to give. Poirot had spent the day in quiet pursuit of the truth. His questions subtle but relentless, peeling back layers of deception like an artist uncovering a hidden sketch. The letter from Sir Reginald to Clara, hinting at indiscretions and a meeting by the Madonna painting, had deepened the mystery, while Mrs. Crane's account of an argument in the great hall moments before the murder had tightened the web of suspicion. Now, as the clock struck 7, Poirot decided it was time to apply a different kind of pressure, not with accusations but with the weight of observation. He rose, his small stature commanding the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge of authority. "The murder of Sir Reginald Ashby is a puzzle most complex, but the pieces, they begin to fit. I have heard your stories, your alibis, yet there is one among you who holds a truth that must now be spoken. I ask you to reflect, to search your hearts. The little gray cells, they see much, but the heart, it reveals what the mind conceals." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their faces a gallery of strained expressions. Lady Beatrice, her black dress stark against her pale skin, stared at Poirot with icy defiance, but her fingers betrayed a faint tremble. Edward Ashby, standing near Clara, clenched his jaw, his eyes fixed on the floor. Dr. Malcolm Vance polished his spectacles with unnecessary vigor, while Mr. Leonard Crane muttered under his breath, his wife Evelyn twisting her now broken necklace. Mr. Julian Holt, the solicitor, remained impassive, his briefcase a constant shield at his side. It was Clara Beaumont who broke first, her composure crumbling like a dam under floodwaters. She stood abruptly, her sketchbook falling to the floor, its pages scattering. "I can't bear it any longer," she cried, her voice raw with emotion. "You're all looking at me, judging me, but I didn't kill him. I swear I didn't." The room froze, every eye on Clara as tears streamed down her face. Edward stepped toward her, his hand outstretched, but she pushed him away. "No, Edward, don't. They need to know the truth, at least part of it." Poirot's expression remained serene, but his eyes gleamed with interest. "Speak, mademoiselle," he said gently. The truth, it is a burden only when it is hidden. What is this truth you carry? Clara took a shuddering breath, her hands twisting together. The letter, it wasn't just about my art. Sir Reginald, he knew something about me, something I was ashamed of. I had an affair years ago with a married man in London. It was brief, foolish. But Sir Reginald found out. He said he'd keep it quiet if I helped him with the paintings, verifying their authenticity, using my skills as an artist. But last week he changed. He said he'd tell everyone unless I did more, something about the Madonna painting. I don't know what he meant, but he was so angry, so insistent. Hastings' heart raced. This was the indiscretion hinted at in the letter. A secret that could ruin Clara's reputation. He glanced at Poirot, whose face betrayed nothing, though his fingers tapped lightly on his notebook. "And this meeting at 9:45, Poirot asked. "You did not attend, you say?" Clara shook her head. "No, I was too afraid. I showed the letter to Edward, and he told me to stay away, to stay with him in the drawing room. He said he'd protect me." Edward's face flushed, and he stepped forward. "It's true, Mr. Poirot. I knew about the letter, and I told Clara to ignore it. Uncle was always manipulating people, using their secrets against them. I didn't want her caught in his games." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you, Monsieur Edward, did you confront your uncle about this? Did you go to the Great Hall at 9:45? Edward's jaw tightened. "Number I was with Clara, as I said. We were in the drawing room talking about her sketches. Ask anyone. They saw us." Dr. Vance cleared his throat, his voice sharp. "I saw them together near the fireplace until the cry. But that doesn't mean they're innocent. Secrets like that, they breed motives." Clara's tears fell faster, and she sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. Poirot, unmoved by the outburst, turned to the others. "Mademoiselle Beaumont has shown courage in revealing her secret. But there are more secrets in this room, non? Who else has something to confess?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment no one spoke. Then, to Hastings' surprise, Mr. Julian Holt, the solicitor, stepped forward, his usually impassive face pale. "Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice low, I must speak. Sir Reginald's will, the changes he wanted to make, they weren't just about the paintings. He intended to disinherit Lady Beatrice." A gasp rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "That's preposterous," she said, her voice cutting like glass. "Reginald would never do such a thing. I was his wife." Holt hesitated, then opened his briefcase, producing a document. "This is the draft he gave me yesterday morning. He wanted to leave the bulk of his estate, including the paintings, to Edward, with a provision for Miss Beaumont to receive the Madonna painting. He said you'd betrayed him, Lady Beatrice, though he wouldn't elaborate." Lady Beatrice's composure shattered, her face a mask of fury. "Betrayed him? He was the one who betrayed me, with his secrets, his schemes, his precious paintings. I gave up everything for him, and this is how he repays me?" Poirot's gaze was steady, but his voice was soft. "And this betrayal, madame, what form did it take?" Lady Beatrice caught herself, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I won't say another word," she said coldly. "You've no proof of anything." Poirot nodded as if her refusal was expected. "The proof, madame, it will come. For now I thank Monsieur Holt for his candor. As the guests dispersed, shaken by the revelations, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "The lies they unravel, mon ami," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Mademoiselle Beaumont's affair, Lady Beatrice's disinheritance, these are not the motive, but they are threads in the tapestry. The Madonna painting, it is central. Sir Reginald's argument, Mrs. Crane's sighting, Clara's sketch, all point to it." Hastings frowned. "But what's so special about the Madonna? Is it a forgery or something else?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, Hastings, is what we must discover. The emotional turning point. It reveals the heart, but the mind, it must now take over. We are close, mon ami, but the killer, they are clever and they watch us as closely as we watch them." The manor's shadows deepened as night fell, and Hastings felt a chill that went beyond the evening air. Clara's confession and Holt's revelation had exposed raw wounds, but the truth of Sir Reginald's murder remained just out of reach, hidden in the intricate dance of motives and secrets. Chapter 9. The Trap. The air in Ashfield Manor was thick with the weight of unspoken truths, the revelations of the previous evening hanging over the guests like a storm cloud ready to burst. Clara Beaumont's confession of her past affair and Mr. Julian Holt's disclosure about Sir Reginald Ashby's altered will had cracked the facade of civility, leaving raw nerves and simmering resentments exposed. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator of truth, sensed that the moment was ripe to tighten the net around the killer. His little gray cells, fueled by the clues, the candle, the shadow, the letter, the argument, were aligning into a pattern, and he was ready to set a trap to force the murderer's hand. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the drawing-room window, felt the tension coil tighter, knowing that Poirot's next move would be a masterstroke. The morning of the third day dawned gray and overcast, the sky mirroring the unease within the manor. Poirot, immaculate in his tailored suit, gathered the guests in the great hall where the 5 paintings, the 5 Little Piggy, stood on their easels, their silent figures seeming to watch the proceedings with an eerie intensity. Inspector Burrows, his confidence waning, stood by the door, his notebook clutched like a lifeline. The guests, summoned under the pretense of a progress report, took their seats with varying degrees of reluctance. Lady Beatrice, her face a mask of cold defiance. Edward Ashby, his eyes shadowed with worry. Clara Beaumont, clutching her sketchbook. Dr. Malcolm Vance, his spectacles glinting with suspicion. Mr. Leonard Crane, glowering. Mrs. Evelyn Crane, twisting the remnants of her pearl necklace. And Mr. Holt, his briefcase as ever present as his guarded expression. Poirot stood before the Madonna painting, his small stature commanding the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and deliberate, "the murder of Sir Reginald Ashby is a crime of precision, of passion, and of secrets. But the truth, it cannot hide forever from Hercule Poirot. Today I shall reveal what I have learned, and I invite the one who holds the final piece of this puzzle to step forward, before I must name them myself." A murmur rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Let us begin with the facts. Sir Reginald was killed at 10 o'clock, stabbed with a dagger from this very case." He gestured to the empty glass case, its door still ajar. "The key was in his study, accessible to all, yet only one took it. The cry was heard at 10, and the body was found moments later in this hall beneath these paintings. No one admits to seeing him leave the drawing room, yet he was here arguing with someone, as Madame Crane has told us." Mrs. Crane flinched, her fingers tightening on her necklace, but Poirot continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "This argument, it concerned the Madonna painting. Sir Reginald said, 'You'll not have it, not while I live.' And moments later, he was dead. The Madonna, it is the heart of this crime, non? But why?" He turned to the painting, its serene figure gazing down. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, your sketch. It shows a shadow not present in the canvas. A shadow, perhaps, of the killer standing here with a candle, as Madame Crane saw. And this candle found in the corridor burned briefly. Why? To light a secret act. To conceal a movement." Clara's face paled and Edward reached for her hand, but Poirot's eyes moved to Lady Beatrice. "Madame Ashby, your husband, intended to disinherit you, to give the paintings and much of his estate to Monsieur Edward and Mademoiselle Beaumont. This, it was a betrayal, oui? Did it drive you to act?" Lady Beatrice's eyes flashed. "I told you, Mr. Poirot, I was on the terrace. I saw nothing, did nothing. You've no proof." Poirot nodded as if her defiance was expected. "And you, Monsieur Crane," he said, turning to the collector. "Your rivalry with Sir Reginald was bitter. The warrior painting, it was stolen from you, you say. Did you take your revenge?" Crane's face reddened. "I've said it before, I was with Vance. I didn't kill him, though I won't pretend I'm sorry he's gone." Poirot's gaze shifted to Doctor. "Vance. And you, monsieur, you questioned the authenticity of the warrior painting. Did you know something Sir Reginald wished to keep hidden? A forgery, perhaps, that would ruin his reputation?" Vance's lips tightened. "I had my doubts, but I had no reason to kill him. I was in the drawing room, as I told you." Poirot's trap was subtle, his words designed to provoke, to unsettle. He turned to Edward and Clara. "Monsieur Edward, Mademoiselle Beaumont, you share a secret, a letter, a bond. Sir Reginald threatened to expose Mademoiselle Beaumont's past. Did one of you or both decide to silence him?" Edward stood, his voice trembling with anger. "That's enough, Mr. Poirot. Clara and I were together. We didn't go near the hall. You're twisting everything." Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. "Twisting, no. I am merely arranging the facts. And you, Monsieur Holt, your briefcase, it holds the will, the secrets of Sir Reginald's intentions. Did you act to protect those secrets or to ensure they were never revealed?" Holt's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened on his briefcase. "I was in the library, as I said. I had no part in this." The room was a powder keg, and Poirot's words were the spark. Hastings watched, his heart pounding as the guest's composure frayed. Clara's hands shook, Edward's fists clenched, and Lady Beatrice's icy stare wavered. Poirot, sensing the moment, raised his voice slightly. "The killer is here among us. They used the candle to light their way, the key to unlock the dagger, the shadow to hide their presence. But the little gray cells they see through, the shadows. I give you this chance. Speak now, or I shall speak for you." The silence was deafening, broken only by a sudden sob from Mrs. Crane. She stood, her face crumpling. "I can't bear it any more," she cried. "I lied, Mr. Poirot. I didn't just see Sir Reginald arguing. I saw who it was. It was Dr. Vance." The room erupted in gasps. Vance's spectacles slipped down his nose, his face paling. "That's absurd," he snapped. "I was in the drawing room with Crane. She's lying to protect her husband." Mrs. Crane shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No. I saw you, Dr. Vance, by the Madonna painting. You were holding a candle and Sir Reginald was shouting at you. I ran away because I was afraid, but I saw you. Poirot's eyes gleamed, but he raised a hand for calm. Madame Crane, this is most serious. You are certain it was Monsieur Vance? She nodded, her voice trembling. Yes. I didn't want to say because Leonard, he'd be furious if he knew I was near the hall. But it was him. Vance stood, his voice rising. This is a fabrication. I never left the drawing room. Crane, tell them. Crane hesitated, his scowl deepening. I don't know. We were talking, but I wasn't watching you every second. Poirot's trap had worked, sowing doubt and forcing a revelation, but Hastings could see his friend was not yet satisfied. The truth, it emerges, Poirot said softly, but it is not complete. Madame Crane, you have been brave. Monsieur Vance, we shall speak further. For now, I ask you all to remain here under the inspector's watch. As the guests dispersed, shaken by the accusation, Poirot drew Hastings aside. The trap, it has caught something, mon ami, he said, his voice low. But is Madame Crane's story the truth or another layer of deception? The Madonna, the candle, the shadow, they are the keys, and we are close, very close. Hastings felt a chill, sensing the net tightening. The trap had been set, and the killer, cornered, was beginning to falter. But the final truth remained just out of reach. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The great hall of Ashfield Manor was a stage set for revelation, its high ceilings and ancient beams casting an air of solemnity over the gathered guests. The 5 paintings, the 5 little pigs, stood on their easels, their silent figures bearing witness to the drama about to unfold. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating authority, stood before them, his green eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who had unraveled the truth. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated among the suspects, felt his heart pound with anticipation. The trap set in the previous evening's confrontation had shaken the guests, and Mrs. Crane's accusation against Dr. Malcolm Vance had ignited a spark of chaos. Now Poirot was ready to deliver the final act of this intricate mystery. The guests, summoned once more to the hall, sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of dread and defiance. Lady Beatrice Ashby, her black dress stark against her pale skin, sat rigidly, her eyes fixed on Poirot with a mixture of fear and resentment. Edward Ashby gripped Clara Beaumont's hand, his youthful face drawn with worry. Clara, her sketchbook absent for the first time, looked fragile, her auburn hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Dr. Vance, his spectacles glinting, sat with his arms crossed, his expression one of indignant denial. Mr. Leonard Crane glowered, his wife Evelyn trembling beside him, her broken pearl necklace clutched in her hand. Mr. Julian Holt, the solicitor, held his briefcase tightly, his thin lips pressed into a line. Inspector Burrows stood by the door, his notebook open but his confidence visibly shaken, deferring to Poirot's command. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, the murder of Sir Reginald Ashby is a crime of cunning, of passion, and of precision. But the truth, it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. Today I shall reveal the killer, and I shall show you how the little gray cells have pieced together the puzzle of the 5 little pigs. He paced slowly before the paintings, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us begin with the facts. Sir Reginald was stabbed in this hall at 10 o'clock with a dagger taken from this case. He gestured to the empty glass case, its door still ajar. The key was in his study, accessible to all, yet only one used it. The cry was heard at 10, and the body was found moments later beneath these paintings. No one admits to seeing him leave the drawing room, yet he was here arguing with someone about the Madonna painting, as Madame Crane witnessed. He turned to the Madonna painting, its serene figure gazing down. This painting, it is the heart of the crime. Mademoiselle Beaumont's sketch showed a shadow not present on the canvas, a shadow, I believe, of the killer illuminated by a candle. And this candle, found in the corridor, burned briefly, suggesting a secret movement. But let us reconstruct the events step by step. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each guest. Sir Reginald was a man of secrets, of manipulations. He used the paintings not only as art, but as tools of power. The Madonna, in particular, held a secret worth killing for. Let us consider the motives. Lady Beatrice, you faced disinheritance, a betrayal by your husband. Monsieur Edward and Mademoiselle Beaumont, you were bound by a letter threatening to expose a past indiscretion. Monsieur Crane, you bore a grudge over the warrior painting stolen from you years ago. Monsieur Vance, you questioned the painting's authenticity, a threat to Sir Reginald's reputation. And Monsieur Holt, you held the will, the key to Sir Reginald's intentions. A murmur rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. The red herrings, they were many, Monsieur. Crane's anger, Madame Crane's accusation against Monsieur Vance. These were distractions. But the truth, it lies in the details. The candle, the shadow, the letter, the argument. Let us examine the timeline. He turned to Clara. Mademoiselle Beaumont, your letter from Sir Reginald requested a meeting at 9:45 by the Madonna painting. You claim you did not go, but your sketch suggests you saw something, a shadow cast by a candle. I believe you were in the corridor not to meet Sir Reginald, but to observe. You saw the killer, non? Clara's eyes widened, but she nodded faintly. I was in the corridor looking for my pencil. I saw a shadow by the painting, but I was too afraid to stay. I ran back to the drawing room. Poirot nodded. And this shadow, it was cast by the candle in the corridor, used by the killer to light their way. But who was it? He turned to Mrs. Crane. Madame, you saw Sir Reginald arguing with someone by the Madonna moments before the cry. You named Monsieur Vance, but I believe you were mistaken. Or perhaps you lied to protect another. Mrs. Crane gasped, her hands trembling. I thought it was him. It was dark and I was frightened. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The truth, it is not in what you thought, but in what you saw. The candle, the shadow, the argument, they point to one person, one motive. Sir Reginald's will, it was to be changed, giving the Madonna to Mademoiselle Beaumont and the estate to Monsieur Edward. But there was another secret hidden in the painting itself. He approached the Madonna, his fingers tracing the frame. This painting, it is not merely art. It conceals a document, a letter perhaps, or a deed that Sir Reginald discovered. He threatened to reveal it, to ruin someone's life, and that someone acted to silence him. Poirot turned, his gaze locking on to Mr. Julian Holt. Monsieur Holt, you have been quiet, but your briefcase, it holds more than a will. You were in the library, you say, but I believe you were in the hall, arguing with Sir Reginald about the Madonna. The document hidden in the painting, It was a forgery, a fake provenance you created to inflate its value, a scheme you and Sir Reginald devised years ago. But he grew greedy, threatened to expose you unless you agreed to new terms. You could not allow this, none. Holt's face drained of color, his briefcase slipping from his grasp. "That's preposterous," he stammered. "I was in the library. I had no reason to kill him." Poirot's voice was relentless. "You took the key from the study, unlocked the dagger case, and met Sir Reginald at 9:45. You argued, and when he refused to yield, you stabbed him using the candle to light your way and conceal your movements. The shadow Mademoiselle Beaumont saw was yours, cast as you stood by the painting searching for the document. You returned to the library, but the scuff mark in the corridor, a mark from your briefcase, betrayed you." Holt staggered back, his hands raised. "No, you can't prove it." Poirot gestured to Burroughs, who stepped forward with a pair of constables. "Search Monsieur Holt's briefcase," Poirot said. "You will find a forged document hidden there after he retrieved it from the painting's frame." The constables opened the briefcase, revealing a yellowed paper tucked among legal documents. Burroughs examined it, his eyes widening. "It's a provenance for the Madonna, dated falsely. It's a forgery." Holt collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "He was going to ruin me," he whispered. "I had no choice." Poirot's expression was stern but not unkind. "You had a choice, monsieur, and you chose murder. The little gray cells, they see what others miss." The guests sat in stunned silence as Holt was led away, the truth settling over the room like dust after a storm. Hastings, his heart still racing, marveled at Poirot's genius. The shadow, the candle, the scuff mark, all had pointed to Holt, a man whose quiet demeanor had hidden a desperate crime. As the constables escorted Holt out, Poirot turned to the paintings, his voice soft. "The 5 little pigs, they told their stories, and one led us to the truth. The Madonna, she guarded her secret well, but not well enough." The hall fell silent, the weight of the revelation lingering as Poirot prepared to take his leave, his work complete. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The great hall of Ashfield Manor, so recently a stage for revelation, now lay quiet, its air heavy with the aftermath of truth. The 5 paintings, the 5 little pigs, were stood on their easels, their silent figures no longer accusatory but serene, as if relieved of their burden. Hercule Poirot, his task complete, stood by the Madonna painting, his small frame silhouetted against the fading light of the late afternoon. His green eyes, sharp and contemplative, surveyed the room where the guests had dispersed, their faces a mix of relief, guilt, and exhaustion. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the fireplace, felt the weight of the case lift. Yet a lingering unease remained, as if the manor's shadows still held secrets not fully uncovered. Mr. Julian Holt's confession, wrung from him by Poirot's relentless logic, had brought the investigation to a close. The forged provenance hidden in his briefcase, the scuff mark from his hurried movements, the candle's brief flame, all had pointed to him as the murderer of Sir Reginald Ashby. Inspector Burroughs, reinvigorated by the arrest, had taken Holt into custody, his earlier fumbling replaced by a newfound respect for Poirot's genius. Yet as the constables led Holt away, Poirot's expression had been not one of triumph, but of quiet reflection, as if the resolution of the crime was merely the prelude to a deeper contemplation. Now, as the manor settled into an uneasy calm, Poirot invited Hastings to join him in Sir Reginald's study, a room of polished wood and leather-bound books that seemed to echo its late owner's commanding presence. Poirot settled into a chair behind the desk, his hands folded, his mustache perfectly symmetrical. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "The case, it is solved, yet the mind, it does not rest. The little gray cells, they ponder not only the crime, but the nature of those who commit it." Hastings, leaning against a bookcase, nodded. "It was brilliant, Poirot. The way you pieced it together, the candle, the shadow, the scuff mark. But I'll admit I didn't suspect Holt until the end. He seemed so unremarkable." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Exactement, Hastings. The unremarkable, they are the most dangerous, for they hide in plain sight. Monsieur Holt, he was not driven by passion or rage, but by fear of exposure, of ruin. The Madonna painting with its hidden document was his undoing, and Sir Reginald's greed, it was the spark." Hastings frowned, recalling the forged provenance. "But why the Madonna? Why was that painting so important?" Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "The Madonna, it was not merely a painting, but a symbol of deception. The forged provenance, it inflated its value, making it the cornerstone of Sir Reginald's collection. And Monsieur Holt's fortune. Sir Reginald, he discovered the forgery perhaps by chance, and sought to use it to control Holt, to demand more. But Holt, he could not allow this. The document hidden in the frame was his secret, and he killed to protect it." Hastings shook his head, marveling at the intricacy of the scheme. And Clara's sketch, the shadow, it was Holt all along, standing by the painting with the candle. "Oui," Poirot said, and Mademoiselle Beaumont, she saw what her artist's eye could not ignore, though her fear kept her silent. The candle, the scuff mark from Holt's briefcase, the argument overheard by Madame Crane. These were the threads that wove the truth. But Hastings, it is not enough to catch the killer. We must understand why they act, why they choose the path of darkness. He rose, moving to the window where the Devon hills stretched toward the horizon. Sir Reginald. He was a man of power, of manipulation. He used secrets, Clara's indiscretion, Lady Beatrice's betrayal, Crane's rivalry, to control those around him. But power, it breeds enemies, and one enemy was cleverer than he. Hastings joined him at the window, the weight of the case settling into perspective. What about the others? Lady Beatrice, Edward, Clara. They all had secrets, motives. Poirot nodded. Each had their reasons, their pains. Lady Beatrice, she faced disinheritance, a wound to her pride. Monsieur Edward and Mademoiselle Beaumont, they were bound by love and fear, protecting each other from Sir Reginald's threats. Monsieur Crane, his anger was real but not lethal. And Madame Crane, her lie about Monsieur Vance, it was born of fear for her husband, not malice. But none of these Hastings had the precision, the desperation of Monsieur Holt. He turned, his expression softening. The human heart, it is complex, no? It loves, it hates, it fears. The little gray cells, they see the patterns, but it is the heart that drives the hand to strike. This is why I, Hercule Poirot, do not merely solve crimes. I seek to understand the souls behind them. Hastings smiled, accustomed to Poirot's philosophical musings. You've done it again, old chap. Burroughs would have been lost without you. I dare say he'll take all the credit, though. Poirot's mustache twitched with amusement. Let him, mon ami. The truth, it is my reward. The inspector, he will learn in time that the obvious is rarely the answer. For now we have restored order, and that is enough. As they prepared to leave the study, Poirot paused by the desk, where Sir Reginald's ledgers still lay open. He closed one gently, as if closing a chapter. The 5 little pigs, they have told their stories, and one has spoken of murder. But the manor, it will keep its other secrets, as all old houses do. They stepped into the corridor where the sounds of the manor, servants tidying, guests packing, signaled a return to normalcy. Lady Beatrice, her composure restored, was arranging to depart for London. Edward and Clara, their hands entwined, spoke in low tones, their future uncertain but hopeful. Dr. Vance, his scholarly pride intact, was already planning an article on the painting's provenance, while Mr. and Mrs. Crane prepared to return to their estate, their marriage strained but enduring. Poirot, his suitcase packed, declined an invitation to stay for dinner. The train to London, it awaits, he said to Hastings, his eyes bright. And there, perhaps, another puzzle for the little grey cells. But for now, mon ami, we leave Ashfield Manor to heal its wounds. As they stepped into the evening air, the manor's ivy-clad walls loomed behind them, a silent witness to the drama that had unfolded. Hastings glanced back, feeling a pang of melancholy. "It's a beautiful place," he said, "but I'll be glad to leave it behind." Poirot nodded, adjusting his hat. "Beauty, Hastings, it is a mask, and truth it lies beneath. Come, let us go. The world, it has more mysteries, and I, Hercule Poirot, am ready for them." They climbed into the waiting motor car, the gravel crunching under the tires as they left Ashfield Manor behind. Its secrets laid bare, its shadows dispelled by the relentless light of Poirot's genius. Chapter 12. The Tapestry Tightens. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Greenshaw Folly, casting a golden glow over the drawing room where Hercule Poirot had assembled the household. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very walls of the manor held their breath, waiting for the Belgian detective to unravel the threads of deceit that bound them all. Captain Hastings stood near the fireplace, his arms crossed, his brow furrowed with the effort of keeping pace with Poirot's intricate reasoning. Miss Jane Marple sat in her usual corner, her knitting needles clicking softly, her serene expression a mask for the sharp mind that had already pieced together much of the puzzle. The suspects, Mrs. Clara Cresswell, Mr. Edward Harrow, Miss Vivian Harrow, Mr. Willis the butler, and the young maid Elsie, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces betraying varying degrees of unease. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, neat figure commanding attention despite his unassuming stature. His mustache was impeccably groomed, his patent leather shoes gleamed, and his eyes sparkled with the quiet confidence of a man who had glimpsed the truth. He held a single sheet of paper in his hand, a list of names and times meticulously compiled from the interviews and observations of the past 2 days. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice smooth and deliberate, "we have arrived at a moment of clarity in this affair. The murder of Monsieur Richard Blake, stabbed in the library with a dagger from the mantelpiece, was no act of impulse. No, it was a crime of calculation woven with care to mislead. But Hercule Poirot, he does not permit himself to be misled. The little gray cells, they have been at work. and they have uncovered the tapestry of lies. Mrs. Cresswell, her single pearl earring catching the light, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice sharp, "I hope you do not intend to accuse without evidence. This has been a dreadful ordeal for us all." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture polite but firm. "Madame, rest assured, Poirot accuses only when the evidence is certain. Let us review step by step the events of that fateful night and morning, for it is in the details that the truth lies." He turned to the group, his gaze sweeping over each face. "Monsieur Blake was last seen alive at 9 o'clock on Friday evening by Monsieur Willis, carrying a glass of brandy to the library. The glass, found beside his body, contained a trace of a sedative, not enough to kill, but enough to dull his senses. At 8 o'clock the next morning, the maid, Elsie, discovered him dead, stabbed through the heart. The dagger, taken from the mantelpiece, bore no fingerprints, a curious absence, non? The note signed V, found in his room, pointed to Mademoiselle Harrow. And then there is the pearl earring belonging to Madame Cresswell, found beneath the library table. Edward Harrow, his face pale, leaned forward. "That note was a forgery, Monsieur Poirot. My sister would never—" Poirot cut him off with a gentle nod. "Patience, Monsieur Harrow. The note, it is indeed a point of interest, but not for the reason you fear. Let us consider the alibis for the critical hour between 8 and 9 on Saturday morning." He consulted his paper, his voice steady. "Madame Cresswell, you claim to have been in your room preparing for breakfast. Monsieur Harrow, you were in the garden sketching the roses. Mademoiselle Harrow, you were in the conservatory reading. Monsieur Willis, you were in the kitchen overseeing the staff. And Elsie, you were cleaning the upstairs hall. Yet, mes amis, one of you lies, and it is the lie that betrays the killer." Hastings, unable to contain himself, blurted, "But Poirot, how can you be sure? Everyone's alibi seems plausible, and the sedative complicates things. Was Blake drugged the night before or that morning?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "An excellent question, mon ami. The sedative, it is the key to the timing. The police surgeon informs me that the amount in Monsieur Blake's system would have taken effect within 30 minutes and lasted no more than 2 hours. If he drank the brandy at 9, as Monsieur Willis claims, the sedative would have worn off by midnight. Yet Blake was alive until at least 8 when he was seen by Elsie entering the library. This suggests the sedative was administered later. Perhaps in something else he consumed that morning." Miss Marple's needles paused, and she spoke softly. "The breakfast tray, perhaps. I noticed Elsie brought coffee to the library at 7:30. It would have been a simple matter to slip something into the cup." Poirot nodded, his expression approving. "Précisément, mademoiselle. The coffee, it is a possibility we must explore. Elsie, tell me, did you prepare the tray yourself?" The maid, her hands twisting in her apron, nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir. I made the coffee and took it to Mr. Blake at 7:30, like he asked. He was reading in the library, looking a bit tired but alive, sir. And did you see anyone else near the library?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. Elsie hesitated, her cheeks flushing. I saw Mrs. Cresswell in the hall, sir, just before I went in. She was coming from the direction of her room carrying a shawl. She said good morning and passed by." Mrs. Cresswell's lips tightened. I was merely going to the drawing room, Monsieur Poirot. I often take a walk through the house in the morning." Poirot made a small note in his book. "Merci, Elsie. Now let us consider the earring. It is a delicate thing, no? Easily lost, but not so easily overlooked. Madame Cresswell, you wore 2 such earrings at dinner on Friday, yet on Saturday morning only 1. How do you explain this?" Mrs. Cresswell's hand instinctively touched her ear. I must have lost it during the evening. These things happen, Monsieur Poirot. It doesn't mean I was in the library when Richard was killed." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. "Yet the earring was found beneath the table near the brandy glass. And there is another detail, the rug in the library. It was slightly askew, as if moved to cover something. Perhaps a struggle, or perhaps a deliberate act to mislead." Vivian Harrow, who had been silent, spoke up, her voice trembling. "You're saying someone planted the earring to make it look like Clara was there? That's monstrous." Poirot turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Mademoiselle, in a crime such as this, nothing is as it seems. The note, the earring, the sedative, these are threads in a tapestry, but the pattern is not yet complete. Let us now consider motive. Monsieur Blake, he was a man of wealth and secrets. Madame Cresswell, you stood to inherit a substantial sum upon his death, no? Monsieur Harrow, your business dealings with Blake were not as amicable as you claim. Mademoiselle Harrow, your engagement to Blake was broken abruptly last month. Monsieur Willis, your arrival at Greenshaw Folly is most convenient. And Elsie, your loyalty to this household, perhaps it hides a deeper grievance." The room fell silent, each suspect exchanging glances, some defiant, others fearful. Hastings whispered, "Poirot, you're tightening the net. But who's the real culprit?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Patience, Hastings. The net, it is not yet closed. But I have set a trap, and the killer they will soon reveal themselves. For now I ask you all to remain in the house. We will reconvene this evening." As the group dispersed, Miss Marple leaned toward Poirot, her voice low. "You've stirred the waters, Monsieur Poirot. Someone will act, and when they do, we shall see the truth." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Oui, mademoiselle. The killer believes they have outwitted Hercule Poirot, but they have not reckoned with the power of observation. Tonight we shall see the tapestry complete." The day passed in a haze of tension, with the suspects moving like shadows through the manor. Poirot spent the afternoon in quiet consultation with Inspector Grayson, examining the coffee tray and the library rug for further clues. Hastings, restless as ever, trailed behind, marveling at Poirot's calm precision. Miss Marple, meanwhile, sat by the window, her knitting a pretext for watching the household, her mind weaving its own pattern of suspicion. As evening approached, Poirot prepared for the final act. He had planted a seed of doubt, and he knew the killer would be compelled to act, to cover a mistake, to destroy evidence, or to silence a witness. The stage was set, and Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells, was ready to unveil the truth. Chapter 13. The Trap Springs. The twilight cast a soft, melancholic glow over Greenshaw Folly, its grand facade looming against the fading light like a sentinel guarding its secrets. Within the manor, the atmosphere was electric with unspoken dread, as if each occupant sensed the noose of truth tightening. Hercule Poirot, ever the master of timing, had chosen the library for the evening's gathering, a deliberate choice, for it was here that Richard Blake had met his end, and here that the killer's facade would crumble. Captain Hastings, standing by the tall bookshelves, fidgeted with his cufflinks, his impatience barely contained. Miss Jane Marple, seated near the window with her knitting, appeared as tranquil as ever, though her eyes gleamed with quiet anticipation. The suspects, Mrs. Clara Cresswell, Mr. Edward Harrow, Miss Vivian Harrow, Mr. Willis, and Elsie, filed in, their faces a gallery of anxiety, defiance, and guarded hope. Poirot stood before the fireplace, the very mantelpiece from which the dagger had been taken. His small frame was immaculate, his mustache perfectly symmetrical, his eyes alight with the fire of certainty. In his hand, he held the pearl earring, its delicate sheen catching the lamplight. The room was silent save for the faint crackle of the fire and the distant ticking of a clock in the hall. Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice resonant with calm authority. Tonight, we shall bring this affair to its conclusion. The murder of Monsieur Richard Blake was a crime of precision designed to deceive. But the truth, it is like a thread in a tapestry. Pull it, and the pattern unravels. Hercule Poirot has pulled this thread, and now the killer stands exposed. Mrs. Cresswell's hand tightened on her shawl, her voice sharp. Monsieur Poirot, this theatrics is tiresome. If you have evidence, present it, or let us be done with this charade. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Patience, madame. The evidence, it is all here in the details. Let us reconstruct the crime step by step and see where the little gray cells lead us. He paced slowly, his movements deliberate. Monsieur Blake was found dead at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, stabbed with a dagger from this very mantelpiece. The brandy glass found beside him contained a sedative. The pearl earring belonging to Madame Cresswell was discovered beneath the table. A note signed V pointed to Mademoiselle Harrow. And the rug, it was askew as if to hide something. These are the clues, mes amis, but they are not the whole story. Hastings, unable to resist, interjected. Poirot, you said the sedative was key. Was it in the coffee, as Miss Marple suggested? Poirot nodded. Oui, Hastings. The coffee brought by Elsie at 7:30 was the vehicle for the sedative. The police laboratory confirms a trace of chloral hydrate in the dregs of the cup. This sedative, it dulled Monsieur Blake's senses, making him an easy target for the killer. But who administered it, and when? Elsie's eyes widened, her voice trembling. Sir, I swear I didn't put anything in the coffee. I made it fresh, like always, and took it straight to Mr. Blake. Poirot raised a hand, his tone soothing. Calm yourself, Elsie, I do not accuse you. But you saw Madame Cresswell in the hall, no? And you, madame, you claim you were merely passing by. Yet the earring, it tells a different story. Mrs. Cresswell's face paled, but she held her ground. I told you I lost it earlier. Anyone could have placed it there. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. But let us consider the sequence of events. Monsieur Blake was alive at 7:30 when Elsie brought the coffee. By 8 he was dead. The sedative, it takes effect within 30 minutes. This leaves a narrow window for the murder between 7:30 and 8. And in this window someone entered the library, took the dagger and struck. Edward Harrow leaned forward, his voice tense. But who, Monsieur Poirot? You've pointed to Clara, to Vivian, even to me. Who do you accuse? Poirot turned to him, his expression grave. Monsieur Harrow, your question is just. Let us examine motive. Monsieur Blake, he was a man of wealth, but also of secrets. Madame Cresswell, you stood to inherit his estate, a fortune that would secure your future. Monsieur Harrow, your business with Blake was failing, and he threatened to expose your debts. Mademoiselle Harrow, your broken engagement left you humiliated and perhaps vengeful. Monsieur Willis, your sudden arrival at Greenshaw Folly raises questions. Were you truly a stranger to Blake? And Elsie, your loyalty to this household, did it conceal a deeper resentment? Vivian Harrow's eyes filled with tears. I didn't kill him. I loved Richard, even after everything. Poirot's gaze softened, but only for a moment. Mademoiselle, your heart, it speaks, but the evidence, it whispers. Let us return to the earring. It was found beneath the table near the brandy glass. But the brandy, it was not the source of the sedative. The coffee was. This suggests the earring was placed later to mislead. And the note signed V, too obvious, no? It was meant to point to you, Mademoiselle Harrow, but it is a clumsy deception. Miss Marple spoke, her voice soft but clear. The rug, Monsieur Poirot, you mentioned it was askew. I wonder if it hid something more, perhaps a mark or another clue. Poirot's eyes twinkled. You are perceptive, mademoiselle. Indeed, beneath the rug, Inspector Grayson found a small stain. Blood not yet fully cleaned. It was not from the fatal wound, which bled little, but from an earlier moment. Perhaps a nick from the dagger as it was drawn. This suggests the killer acted quickly, but not without error. He turned to the group, his voice rising. The killer, they planned carefully. They slipped the sedative into the coffee, knowing Blake's habit of taking it in the library. They waited until he was drowsy, then entered, took the dagger, and struck. But they made mistakes. The earring, the rug, the note. And they made one final error tonight. Poirot paused, his eyes locking onto Mr. Willis. The butler stiffened, his deferential mask slipping for a fraction of a second. Monsieur Willis, Poirot said, you have been most careful, but not careful enough. This afternoon I asked Inspector Grayson to watch the library. They attempted to retrieve something hidden there, a small vial containing traces of chloral hydrate, concealed in a hollowed-out book on the shelf. Willis's face drained of color. I don't know what you mean, sir. Poirot's smile was cold. Do you not? The vial, it bears your fingerprints. You arrived at Greenshaw Folly not by chance, but by design. You knew Monsieur Blake from years past. A business deal gone wrong, a debt unpaid. You posed as a butler biding your time. You slipped the sedative into the coffee, waited for Blake to weaken, then struck. The earring, you placed it to implicate Madame Cresswell. The note you wrote to point to Mademoiselle Harrow. But you could not resist returning to the library to ensure no evidence remained. Willis leapt to his feet, his voice hoarse. You can't prove it. Poirot raised a finger. The vial, Monsieur Willis, the fingerprints, and Elsie, she saw you linger near the library door at 7:40, not in the kitchen as you claimed. You thought yourself clever, but Hercule Poirot, he sees all. The room erupted in gasps. Mrs. Cresswell clutched her chest, Vivian sobbed, and Edward Harrow stared in disbelief. Inspector Grayson stepped forward, handcuffs in hand. Willis's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling as he was led away. Hastings, wide-eyed, turned to Poirot. Good Lord, Poirot, how did you know? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little gray cells, mon ami. They see what others overlook, the timing, the motive, the mistakes. The truth, it always reveals itself. As the suspects dispersed, Miss Marple approached Poirot, her smile warm. A fine tapestry, Monsieur Poirot. You wove it well. Poirot bowed slightly. And you, mademoiselle, saw many of its threads. Together we have brought justice to Greenshaw folly. Chapter 14. The Truth Unveiled. The library of Greenshaw Folly was bathed in the soft amber glow of the evening lamps, but the air within was heavy with the weight of revelation. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers, casting flickering shadows across the faces of those gathered. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, precise figure a beacon of calm amid the storm of emotions that had erupted with Mr. Willis's arrest. Captain Hastings, leaning against a bookcase, wore an expression of mingled relief and astonishment, still grappling with the swiftness of Poirot's denouement. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting now resting in her lap, observed the scene with a quiet satisfaction, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of one who had seen such dramas unfold before. The remaining suspects, Mrs. Clara Cresswell, Mr. Edward Harrow, Miss Vivian Harrow, and Elsie, sat in stunned silence, their earlier tension replaced by a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, paced slowly before the mantelpiece, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. The pearl earring, the vial of chloral hydrate, and the note signed V lay on a small table beside him, each item a silent testament to the crime he had unraveled. His mustache twitched slightly, a sign of the satisfaction he took in bringing order to chaos. Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, the affair of Monsieur Richard Blake's murder is now resolved, but it is the duty of Hercule Poirot to ensure that all is understood. The truth, it is not merely a matter of facts, but of the human heart, its desires, its fears, its betrayals. Let us therefore walk through the tapestry of this crime once more so that no thread remains tangled. Mrs. Cresswell, her composure fraying, spoke sharply. Monsieur Poirot, you've caught the killer. What more is there to say? Let us be done with this dreadful business. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. Madame, the truth. It is not complete until all questions are answered. There are those among you who still wonder. Why did Monsieur Willis act? How did he deceive us all? And what of the clues that pointed elsewhere? These I shall explain. He turned to the group, his gaze sweeping over each face. Monsieur Willis, he was no mere butler. He came to Greenshaw Folly with a purpose, concealed beneath the guise of a temporary servant. Many years ago, he and Monsieur Blake were partners in a venture, a shipping business that promised great wealth. But Blake, he betrayed Willis, leaving him with debts and ruin. Willis, he harbored this grudge, biding his time until the opportunity for revenge presented itself. Hastings, his brow furrowed, interjected, But Poirot, how did he manage to infiltrate the household so perfectly? The timing of the regular butler's illness, it seems too convenient. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. An excellent observation, mon ami. The illness of Monsieur Thompson, it was no accident. Inspector Grayson's inquiries reveal that Thompson consumed a tainted meal the day before Willis arrived. A mild poison, enough to incapacitate but not to kill. Willis, through his connections in the agency, ensured his placement here. He planned meticulously, studying Blake's habits, knowing he took coffee in the library each morning. Miss Marple tilted her head, her voice gentle but incisive. "And the sedative, Monsieur Poirot?" It was a clever touch, ensuring Mr. Blake would not resist. But the earring and the note, those were meant to confuse, were they not? "Précisément, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his smile approving. The chloral hydrate, it was slipped into the coffee Elsie delivered at 7:30. Willis, he lingered near the library as Elsie confirmed, waiting for the sedative to take effect. At 7:40, when Blake was drowsy, Willis entered, took the dagger from the mantelpiece, and struck. The wound was precise, the act swift. But Willis, he was not content to leave it there. He planted the pearl earring stolen from Madame Cresswell's room to cast suspicion on her. The note, signed V, he wrote to implicate Mademoiselle Harrow. These were his red herrings designed to muddy the waters. Vivian Harrow, her eyes still red from tears, spoke softly. "But why me? Why try to make it look like I did it?" Poirot's expression was sympathetic. "Mademoiselle, your broken engagement with Monsieur Blake was known to all. Willis, he saw an opportunity to exploit this, to make the police believe you acted out of scorned love. The note, it was too obvious, no? A true killer does not leave such a blatant clue. It was meant to distract." Edward Harrow clenched his fists. "The scoundrel, to think he nearly ruined my sister's life, and Clara's too." Poirot raised a hand. "Oui, Monsieur Harrow, but let us not forget the other threads. The rug, it was moved to conceal a small blood stain. A nick from the dagger, perhaps, as Willis drew it. The absence of fingerprints on the dagger, it was no accident. Willis wore gloves, a detail he overlooked in his haste to leave the scene. And the vial hidden in the hollowed-out book, it was his final mistake. He could not resist returning to retrieve it, fearing it would betray him." Elsie, her voice trembling, asked, "Sir, how did you know it was him? There were so many clues pointing every which way." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little gray cells, mademoiselle. They see what is not said." Willis, he was too perfect in his role as butler, yet his eyes betrayed unease when questioned about the night before. His alibi for the critical hour, it was weak. Elsie saw him near the library, not in the kitchen. And the vial, it bore his fingerprints, a careless error for one so careful. Hercule Poirot, he notices such things. Mrs. Cresswell, her voice softer now, said, I thought you suspected me, Monsieur Poirot. The earring, it was so damning." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame, the earring was a cruel trick, but it did not fit the pattern of your actions. You are a woman of pride, not of stealth. The killer, he lacked such finesse." Hastings, still marveling, shook his head. "It's brilliant, Poirot. You saw through it all, the timing, the motives, the misdirection. But what made you set the trap in the library?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Mon ami, a killer, they are like a fox, clever but driven by instinct. I knew Willis would return to the library, fearing some evidence remained. By announcing my suspicion of the hollowed-out book, I forced his hand. Inspector Grayson, he watched and waited, and Willis, he walked into the trap." Miss Marple nodded, her expression warm. "A masterful stroke, Monsieur Poirot. In my village I have seen such cunning, but you weave the threads with such elegance." Poirot bowed to her. "Mademoiselle, your insight has been invaluable. The simplicity of your observations, they complement the method of Hercule Poirot. Together we have brought light to the shadows of Greenshaw folly. As the group began to disperse, Inspector Grayson approached Poirot, his face grim but respectful. "You've done it again, Monsieur Poirot. The evidence is solid. Willis has confessed to the poisoning of Thompson and the murder of Blake. He's being taken to the station now." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Inspector. Justice, it is served when the truth is revealed." The room emptied, leaving only Poirot, Hastings, and Miss Marple. Hastings clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You never cease to amaze, old chap. Another case solved by those little gray cells of yours." Poirot's eyes sparkled with quiet pride. "The gray cells, Hastings, they are never idle. But now we rest. Greenshaw folly, it shall know peace once more." Miss Marple rose, gathering her knitting. "Until the next mystery, Monsieur Poirot. For where there are people, there are secrets." Poirot smiled, a rare warmth in his expression. "And where there are secrets, mademoiselle, there is Hercule Poirot." Chapter 15. The Quiet Departure. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Greenshaw Folly, softening the sharp edges of the manor's ancient stonework and lending an air of tranquility to a place that had, until recently, been steeped in suspicion and dread. The sun, just beginning to burn through the haze, cast a gentle light over the rose gardens where dew sparkled like scattered diamonds. Inside, the grand house was quiet, its occupants moving with the subdued relief of those who had weathered a storm. Hercule Poirot, his suitcase neatly packed, stood in the entrance hall, his small, precise figure as immaculate as ever in a tailored suit and polished shoes. His mustache, perfectly symmetrical, seemed to quiver with a quiet satisfaction. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, fussed with his own luggage, casting occasional glances at his friend with a mixture of admiration and wistfulness. Miss Jane Marple, her shawl draped over her shoulders, stood nearby, her knitting bag tucked under her arm, her serene expression belied by the sharp intelligence in her eyes. Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements deliberate. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, his voice warm but tinged with finality. "The affair of Greenshaw Folly is concluded. The little gray cells, they have done their work, and justice, it has been served. Now we return to London, where no doubt another puzzle awaits." Hastings, his face brightening, chuckled. "You make it sound so simple, Poirot. But I'll never forget how you unraveled this one. Willis, the sedative, the earring, the whole lot. It was like watching a magician pull a rabbit from a hat." Poirot's eyes twinkled, though he waved a hand dismissively. "Non, non, Hastings. No magic, only method. The truth, it reveals itself to those who observe with care. The clues, they were all there. The coffee, the rug, the vial. It was merely a matter of arranging them in the proper order." Miss Marple stepped forward, her smile gentle but knowing. "And yet, Monsieur Poirot, it is not only method that solves such mysteries. It is an understanding of people, their weaknesses, their secrets. In my village of St. Mary Mead, I have seen many such dramas, though on a smaller stage. You and I, we see the same truths, though we approach them differently." Poirot bowed slightly, his respect evident. "Mademoiselle, your insight, it is a treasure. Your simplicity, it cuts through the fog of deception. Together we have been formidable, none." Miss Marple's eyes sparkled. "Oh yes, Monsieur Poirot. It has been a pleasure to watch your little gray cells at work. I shall not soon forget Greenshaw Folly." The sound of footsteps interrupted their exchange as Mrs. Clara Cresswell appeared in the hall. Her demeanor softened, though still marked by the strain of recent events. Her single pearl earring gleamed in the morning light, a reminder of the false trail that had nearly ensnared her. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but sincere, "I owe you my gratitude. I feared I would be unjustly accused, but you saw the truth." "Thank you." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, it is the duty of Hercule Poirot to ensure that innocence is not tarnished. The earring, it was a cruel trick, but the truth, it always prevails." Edward Harrow and his sister Vivian joined them, their faces reflecting a mix of relief and lingering sorrow. Vivian, her eyes still shadowed by the pain of her broken engagement, spoke softly. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given us closure. Richard's death. It was a terrible thing, but knowing the truth helps somehow." Poirot's expression was kind. "Mademoiselle, the heart, it heals in time. You are young, and life, it holds many joys yet to come." Edward clasped Poirot's hand. "You've saved my sister's reputation, sir, and mine. If ever you need anything, you have only to ask." Poirot smiled faintly. "Merci, Monsieur Harrow. But Hercule Poirot, he asks only for the truth." Elsie, the maid, hovered at the edge of the group, her apron smoothed nervously. "Sir, I'm sorry I doubted you. I thought you might think it was me with the coffee and all." Poirot's gaze softened. "Mademoiselle Elsie, you are honest and diligent. Never fear the truth, for it protects the innocent." As the farewells continued, Inspector Grayson appeared, his official air tempered by a grudging respect. "Monsieur Poirot, I'll admit I had my doubts, but you've done it again. Willis is in custody and his confession is ironclad. The vial, the fingerprints, the poisoned meal for Thompson, it's all there." Poirot nodded. "Inspector, the evidence. It speaks when we listen. You have been most thorough in your support." Grayson managed a rare smile. "And you most infuriatingly brilliant. Safe travels, sir." With the formalities concluded, Poirot, Hastings, and Miss Marple stepped outside, where a car waited to take them to the station. The mist had lifted, revealing the rolling hills beyond the estate, their green slopes a stark contrast to the dark secrets that had unfolded within the manor's walls. Hastings, ever sentimental, glanced back at Greenshaw Folly. "It's a beautiful place, Poirot, but I shan't be sorry to leave it. Too many shadows." Poirot's eyes followed his gaze. "We, Hastings, but even shadows serve a purpose. They remind us that light, it must be sought. The human heart, it is complex, but the truth, it is simple when we see it clearly." Miss Marple, walking beside them, added, "And yet it is the small things, the glance, the word, the misplaced object that reveal the heart's intentions. In St. Mary Mead I have learned this, and here I see it again." Poirot chuckled softly. "Mademoiselle, you are a philosopher in a shawl. We are kindred spirits, you and I." The car rolled down the drive, leaving Greenshaw Folly behind. As they passed the iron gates, Poirot leaned back, his hands folded neatly, his mind already turning to the next challenge. "The world, it is full of Ascot," Hastings grinned. "And I'll be right there, stumbling along behind you, old chap." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes distant. "And I shall return to my village where the mysteries are quieter but no less intriguing." As the car disappeared into the countryside, Greenshaw Folly stood silent, its secrets laid bare. The roses bloomed, the mist faded, and the manor resumed its quiet dignity, as if the drama of the past days had been but a fleeting shadow. For Hercule Poirot, however, it was another triumph of the little gray cells, a reminder that no matter how clever the criminal, the truth could not hide from the meticulous mind of the Belgian detective.